Let's do it.
So, thank you everyone for joining us. Whatever time zones you're in, thank you for joining us in the early morning, early afternoon, mid-morning, or evening for me, but there we are. So yeah, welcome to Everyday Automation and the Road Forward, No Robots Required. We'll delve a bit deeper into what that title exactly means in a minute, but just in terms of introductions, I'm Hassan Chowdhury. I'm Marketing Assistant at Nyota Logic. And just before we delve into the introductions for the others, I'm just going to launch a poll, which you can slowly do over the course of the next few minutes, which is just about how well you know Nyota, or if you know about Nyota at all, or completely foreign to you. But yeah, there you are. And right, Melanie, do you want to take the floor?
Oh, sure. My name is Melanie Segraves. I, as the screen says, I'm a solutions analyst at Womble Dickinson, US. And I work with Stephen Chan. And I guess we'll talk a little bit. Stephen's going to go into a little bit more about how we chose Nyota Logic. I'll just go into a little bit of my background, which will probably come up throughout, while we're talking today. And that is that I have a marketing and sales background. So I spent probably about 15 years in marketing and sales roles. So why not, pivot and move to KM? And that's what I did about 2 years ago. And, really I always had an interest in technology. Before with, MarTech, I was more thinking about ways to automate the sales cycle without sort of losing that personalized touch that makes, for good marketing strategy. I think that kind of applies today when we're talking about automation. So never meant to, we're going to talk a little bit about how automation is never meant to replace the human interaction, but just to make it a little bit more quality. And that's kind of a little bit of what I brought over from my marketing background. I moved from client development to KM here at Womble Dickinson, and before that, I worked mostly for small businesses. So I had a little bit more of I think I have a little bit more of an entrepreneurial attitude, and meaning that I'm used to working on small teams with limited resources. So that's another thing that I think we'll talk about a little bit today, which is getting creative with what you have. And I'm looking for technology solutions like Nyota Logic that really offer a lot of versatility. So with that being said, I would like to, we've already started the poll. That's great. I see some people were able to find the Q&A box, but I'd like to encourage everybody to continue to ask questions as we go along. We have our correspondent standing by in London there who will who will let us know if there's a pertinent question to what we're talking about. And we told him to chime in if that's the case, or we'll also be answering questions at the end, because we really want to make this more of a conversation and less of a presentation, because that's really what we think that we benefit most from. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Stephen.
Thank you, Melanie. My name is Stephen Chan. I am the Director of Knowledge Solutions at Womble Dickinson, US. A little bit about my background. I am kind of like a retired lawyer. So I practiced, I went to law school, practiced law in DC for a couple federal agencies. After that, I had decided to go back and get a master's degree in library science. And I thought that the law degree and library science are kind of like a perfect marriage with each other. And I came down here to North Carolina and got my master's in library science. And after graduating from that master's program, I began working at Campbell University School of Law as a law librarian, and I was there for about 7 years. And then after that, transitioned out from the law school into a community college here in Winston-Salem, where me and Melanie are both located. And I worked at a community college as the director of a teaching and learning center, and then came here to Womble as the director of knowledge solutions. That's a little bit about me, and I'll pass it on to Jonathan to give a little bit of background about himself.
Thanks, Stephen. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you, and especially with Melanie and Stephen today to present some information about what they've done with Nyota Logic. I'm coming to you from sunny California, so I'm from the other coast, and I've been in legal tech for about 24 years now. So I've been working with legal organizations, helping them automate. I've worked with law firms, corporate legal departments, and government agencies to really introduce them to technology and help streamline a lot of what they're doing internally. So it's been sort of my core focus for a good part of my career. And I'm really excited to continue that with Nyota Logic. I think there's a lot to explore here. And as Melanie said, I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. So if you guys have questions along the way, you want us to go into more detail, please feel free to chat. We'll obviously follow up with some Q&A questions at the end as well. So Hassan, could you move it to the overview slide?
Yeah, I think just before we do that, how well do you know Nyota and what we do question? So 19% of you said Nyota who, fair enough. 78% said I've heard of them. So that's the vast majority there. And just what 3% said they could talk about Nyota all night, which not too bad a thing. But yeah, let's get into it. Jonathan will explain a bit more about what we are.
Excellent. So before we jumped into the conversation about how Womble is using Nyota, I thought I would just sort of highlight some of the main areas of the Nyota platform. So Nyota is a no-code automation platform, and it's comprised of 3 primary areas. So expertise automation, document automation, and process automation. So expertise automation allows you to automate legal advice. So if someone wants to get information about compliance or legal information, you can automate that experience so they don't necessarily have to call and talk to a person. They can get that kind of advice up front. We also have document automation. This allows you to automate documents. So you can do document assembly, create simple documents like NDAs, court filing documents, create complex documents like custom agreements. And then finally, we have process automation, which allows you to connect a lot of these automations together. So for instance, if you create a document, you may want to route that document via email for review and approvals. You can do that. You can incorporate e-signatures. You can also integrate that product with the other solutions that you're using, and we'll talk more about that. So after the document is reviewed, signed, and completed, you could load it into your contract management system or your document management system. So we provide all those tools, and we're unique in that we combine all those together. So you can use all those components in combination. So you can create simple automations and then bring them together to build more complex automations. Underneath all that, we have a data management layer, and this allows you to track all the information that's flowing through your automation so that you have audit history, you can do reporting, and it gives you a level of transparency so that you can see how effective your automation tools are. And as we'll talk about as well, you can reiterate, you can fine tune them, you can build new variations of those based on the feedback you're getting on your automation solutions. So that's sort of a brief overview. I'm going to hand it over to Melanie to sort of kick off the discussion. So here you go, Melanie.
Before that, I'll just chime in, and I had forgotten a little bit to say this during my introduction, but how did Womble start using Nyota Logic? And so it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago when we in the KM department were looking for a document automation tool. And we had tested out a variety of different document automation tools. And it was important to us to kind of automate information and make things a little bit simpler. And as we were looking through them, Melanie and I, boss, talking to him, we concluded that Nyota Logic was the platform for us because it offered the opportunity to not only do document automation, but all of these things that Jonathan has just explained. You know, expertise automation, process automation. We wanted to bring in a tool that would give us the ability to do other things beyond document automation. And that's how we brought in Nyota Logic into the firm. And we're thankful for that. I mean, we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the presentation, but why it was important and why we feel fortunate to be using such a platform, because it does offer the ability to be creative, to be flexible, to do a lot of different things and not just pure document automation. And so that's where we came from, you know, a couple of years ago in deciding that Nyota was going to give us the best option moving forward in the future.
That document automation is kind of the gateway drug, right? When I came over to CAM a couple of years ago, I think that was kind of how we started. That was mostly what we were using Nyota for. And slowly over time, we've been able to build to the point where we're at the process automation point. So it's just been kind of a natural progression. You want to switch the slide? And we'll talk. We'll get the. Oh, there we go. All right. So everyday automation, no robots required. So I guess that was our. I was most pleased with that title with myself. I think. You might be asking yourself, why that title? So I wanted to talk a little bit about the two main concepts behind that. And one is, you know, I used to write a lot about innovation at the firm when I was in marketing. And you can't, and I learned like pretty quickly in that you can't just write about, you know, these are our technology offerings. Because at a certain point, you know, a certain level of firm, you kind of all start to have similar or sometimes the same stuff. So one thing that I want to be a big takeaway from this is that it's not necessarily always about the technology that you're using, but how you're using it that makes you innovative. And I think Nyota Logic has been really essential in us sort of linking together different technology solutions that were kind of being underutilized at the firm. And then the second thing is, so it's you know, essentially automation can be part of our every day. And the second thing is the idea of the no robots, right? Because in legal tech, especially, I've noticed since being on the technology side, there's a lot of buzzwords and there's a lot of talk about artificial intelligence and AI this and AI that. And with that, that's great. But with that comes a lot of misunderstandings about what AI does. And you know, a lot of the products that we use, even Nyota Logic, use AI. So a lot of it is about not letting that freak people out, but educating them about artificial intelligence and just being upfront with them about expectations and knowing that, like, you know, automation is to save people time, but you're going to have a lot of upfront time that you're going to need and resources, because you actually need, at this point anyway, human brains to train AI, right? You need that initial part. You need the human intelligence aspect of it. And a lot of times people come to us and they want this or that. And it's really important to be upfront with them to know that, like, we need the legal minds if we're working on a legal expertise solution and things like that. And these are the time and resources you can expect, but the payout's going to be huge for you. So I think that's a really important takeaway when we're talking about automation. And I have a couple of bullet points here. So one is start small and build. I think that's really important because I know, I don't know the expression, but when I learned pretty quickly on, submitting important business proposals, that you really kind of have to, perfection is kind of ideal, but, you're a lot more likely to win a job if you have a non-perfect submitted proposal than you are a perfect proposal that's late or not turned in. Like at some point, you just kind of have to just get projects going, and you really have to, and you really don't need to always focus on like a huge overhaul of a process. And especially working with attorneys, I feel like attorneys are change adverse a little bit, because by nature a lot of what they do is risk averse. So by starting small, you can really end up with a lot more longevity and success to the projects you're working on, because you're not trying to do too much all at once. And I think that's one big takeaway. And then no, you may not.
And I would have to say that that's kind of how it started for us. And when we brought Nyota on, we had these grand ideas. We're going to automate all this stuff. We're going to create all these documents. We're going to do all of these different things. And we started looking at the big picture. We wanted to create an expert system. We wanted to create, document automation for all these different things. And we were trying to pitch it, even internally to the attorneys and staff. And without ever even developing an application, we were trying to pitch this idea to the attorneys and staff, and they were reluctant. Just kind of saying, well, that, I guess that would be good. I'm not too sure. Do you have anything to show me? And we didn't have anything. So then we started building little things and testing it out. And obviously, through learning the platform, we were developing applications. And then once it started catching on and people saw the utility of it, they started thinking, hey, you know what, that would be a good idea. Can you do this with my document, or can you do this with my process? And we brought it in with a big focus on helping the attorneys, and that was kind of our charge. And it kind of pivoted over time, just because we needed to gain traction with using this tool. And so we started with some staff automations where we could free up some time with the staff to create documents or whatever it may be. And then once that caught on, more and more individuals learned about it, and then started asking the question of, can you automate this? And so that's how it started to grow for us.
Yeah, I would say that's like, from what that's definitely been true. I would also say, as we began to work with some of the process automation parts of Nyota, like the workflow, just automating a part of it, and then letting part of it be manual if that's what people are most comfortable with right now. And then once they're comfortable with the start of it being automated, then let's move to the next phase once they feel safe and confident with what you're doing. So I think that's really important. And I've also put on there to dispel the automation myth. And I think that goes back to kind of talking about technology. I was talking with a friend about, when we were growing up and had the Jetsons and all the technology was on there, and we thought, oh, that's gonna be us one day. But like, well, and then we thought, well, there's robot vacuums, but that's about it. Like, we're not gonna ever come up with technology, especially at a law firm or any place that focuses on professional services. The goal of technology is never to replace anyone or any part of the process, or it's to replace small parts of the process that will allow you to have more quality conversations with, for attorneys, have more quality conversations with your clients. And I like to use this example of, we had come up with it, or I designed a client portal kind of at the beginning. And at first it was like, attorneys were reluctant to have a client portal where people would go to submit questions, because it's like, I want my clients to know they can get me any time of day, right? I'm responsive and this and that. But the truth was, they weren't really being responsive because they just had too many emails to manage. And so this in cases when we're doing like outside general counsel. So the client portal actually was helpful to them because it helped them be more responsive, because it allowed them through the built-in logic to redirect questions to the appropriate people so that clients could get responses quickly. And while it's, I would say maybe upfront appears to be slightly less personal, because it saves so much time and really saved like those back and forth conversations internally between the lawyers, it saved their time and the client's time. And ultimately that, equals to more responsiveness. So, it's just having those conversations and kind of realizing the nuances of automation that I think is really important. So, and I think that we're going to talk about being strategic problem solver. Thank you. That's what we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Let's move on. No, okay. So being a strategic problem solver, I think this is really important. And I guess if there's any time to maybe take notes, this would be now. But I think one of the biggest things that I learned up front, or learned from being in this role, is the importance of asking the right questions and having those conversations up front at the beginning of a project. So I'm just going to throw out some questions I think that are really important, and we can just go from there. One is trying to figure out, what is this person really wanting to achieve? So we have this issue where people come to us and they're like, can you make this do that, and then have it do that, and then like, right? But it should change colors.
Yes.
And then on the next screen, we want to submit it, and then there's pop-up, right? And you go, okay, whoa, right? And the inclination is to just do what they want, because you're like, yeah, I can do that, and that makes sense. And in a certain way, they're sort of our internal clients. But I think it's really important to like take a step back from that and go like, what are you actually trying to do? Like, what do you want to do? And maybe there's another way. Your ideas are great, but like maybe there's another simpler way we could do it, or we could meet in the middle with it. So I think that's really important. Another big one up front that I think sometimes gets forgotten, but like, what's your timeline? Are there any deadlines that you need to hit? And if there are not, I mean, I kind of would suggest making some. I think just to sort of guide the project along. But I think it's really important to know up front what they can expect, and to be realistic with people about the projects. Luckily with Nyota Logic, we're able to come up with solutions very quickly. We were talking earlier before we got on the call about a project that we just worked on that was probably 2 weeks from start to finish. And that's great. And when you tell people that, they're going to be ecstatic, but that's not every case. There's always going to be things where you're going to need, not because of Nyota Logic or us or anything like that, you're just going to need to allow time for attorney input, or holidays, things like that. It's just really important to have a timeline up front.
Yeah, and I think it's important too, when you're having these conversations, to kind of elicit this from the actual client, because as they can start talking about all the different things that they need, or, oh, I want this, and I want to add all these additional questions to a survey, let's say, like a questionnaire. And then as they start spitting out these questions, they start realizing themselves, oh, wait, this is
getting out of hand.
Way more complex.
Yeah.
And then they say, and then I'll always say, so you need this when? By Friday? And they'll be like, yeah, maybe we can't do this right now. And then we ask them, maybe we should take a step back, maybe not do it for this one, but we can start working on this so that,
right,
we can have it for a later date, where we can create a template application that we can deploy quickly. But we've vetted the application with you to test it and make sure it's doing all the things that you need it to do. And so then they realize that it takes more time than, just whipping something together. You want it to be a good application, not one that you just get out just, because you have a time crunch. So that's what we try to do. And I think we always ask that question, when do you need this?
Yeah.
And realistically, when do you need it? So
I think another question that could to piggyback on that is like, is what we're designing, like, is an application we're designing or process we're automating, is this part of something bigger that we don't know about? Like, it's really important, I think, to get the bigger picture behind projects, because that's going to give you a better idea of what, if it's like, for instance, it's the intake form, like, what's the next step of this process? Like, you know, you're helping automate a client intake form, that's great, but where is this information going? Is there, you know, a way that we could kind of get that next step of the process started? What other platforms are you using? Is this going to be client facing? Is this going to be, is the end user going to be internal? There's just all those types of things to know about the whole process. And I think that goes back to just having those conversations at the beginning. So I think that's really important. And who will maintain the application afterward? We got a little app heavy the last couple of years, and then we realized, oh my gosh, so we design them, develop them, support them, change them,
update them, maintain them, you know,
market them. We just, you know, and eventually you go, okay, well, we need to figure out. And so as we're kind of doing that too, and as we've been working with like the IT department, we're really starting to focus more on knowledge transfer. And that is what makes, you know, a no-code platform, or one benefit of a no-code platform is you can find somebody in another department or team that has this ability to see processes and to understand, you know, things that are going on, and then teach them Nyota logic, or rather let them teach themselves. But like, you know, and that's a really, I think long term, that's where we see it going, is having opportunities to sort of, for us to train the trainers, and have other departments move forward with that, and it just offers so much additional support to us too, and it allows us to keep developing and not have to put that on hold because we don't have the resources. So I think that's a big benefit. And let's see what I put it. Oh, data goggles. I don't know if that's a real thing.
It is now.
It is now. Data goggles. So it's like beer goggles, but you're sober and you're at work. And and so like
Fun.
No, it's a lot less fun. But yeah, no, so I think people sometimes, well, I know people make fun of me because I like to do a lot of stuff on paper. Like I like written lists, and I like print out, if you can see here. And one thing that I like to do is sometimes if I'm taking notes, or like when we got if we've gotten a requirements document from somebody to like design an application, or we're looking at they provide us with like a current example or something, I go through and I just highlight what the variables are. So I kind of step out. So the first part of it is like sort of this holistic, you know, conceptual conversation thing. And the second part of it is just going in and seeing like what the data is and where it's moving. And, you know, Jonathan mentioned the data management part of Nyota, and that has really been like very important to the workflow process, to see how that data moves. And you learn pretty quickly that, okay, I should have made that shouldn't have been a text variable. Like if I that should have been an actual date variable, you know, or like or like you learn the benefits of a choice variable. And that's that, like right away you learn, like attorneys especially, they hate blank forms. And it's just like, it's not that hard, but like you're much more likely to get a choice variable, you know, have somebody have user input from a choice variable than an open-ended text. But sometimes, and if you're reporting, you need quantitative, right? So it needs to be something like that. And sometimes you need qualitative. So it's kind of like thinking about everything in terms of being a Nyota variable and just sort of taking time to do just that. I think that's really, and I think it's fun if you get into it. Yeah, if you get into it, variables are fun. But I know one thing, I'll talk about it too. So one thing we use a lot is REST API. So we do API calls to connect Nyota logic to our internal databases and to HiQ, which if you're in the legal industry, that's very heavily used. And one thing in doing those, I learned, like I started out doing the REST API and having everything map in between text variables because it was just so much simpler. And then I realized that HiQ, their workflows, their automations that they offer, a lot of them rely on choice variables. So it's like things like that, just learning what your outputs are and what inputs are needed if you are going to connect it. And maybe at this point, you're not connecting the application to anything, but in the future, what would be useful?
Yeah, and that's what we always try to do, is try to think about how we can expand a particular application. I mean, I think in the beginning when we started doing it, we were looking at individual application and what it can do. But as we've been doing this more and more, we're thinking about the future. We're thinking about how we connect these applications to data sources, or exporting that data to another data source that they can do other things in. So, I mean,
we're thinking about how we've designed applications internally for teams, and then they need what type of reporting they're going to need, or who's going to need access to this information. Like, so we kind of been using sort of designing sort of like admin dashboard panel type things in Nyota logic to that can display and analyze some of the data that the original application brings in. And that is so much easier if you do it ahead of time.
Think about it.
Yeah. If you have to go back and make your outputs work for what they need, it's so difficult, time consuming. And that's when variables are not fun. That's it. That's when.
I think the last bullet point really is, I mean, I started out using Nyota logic 3-4 years ago, and I learned pretty much everything that I could learn about Nyota through the academy. And I don't even think it was called Nyota University. I don't even know what it's called today, but it was Kevin Mulcahy was the voice that I heard 24/7 while I was in it, and just learning it. And one of the really great things about Nyota is the training. I knew nothing about it. I'm not a coder. I'm not a developer. I had always had interest in it, but going through that training, I mean, it was amazing. And I think anybody who takes on this platform, you go through that training, you will learn how to use this platform pretty quickly, because the training is very thorough and it's very good. And when Melanie came on our team, I just kind of gave her the URL and said, hey, go through this, try it out. It does a great job, and it really did. And
what is the insight? What is the kind of takeaway from that though too? Is that we don't do anything the same.
Yeah, and we don't do anything the same. And I think that's the bullet point. The last bullet point is, she'll say, hey, go check my application.
And I'm like, what is this?
What is and she looks at mine and she says the same thing, and she says, I don't even know what you're doing, and so that ability to
it's not that bad. Yeah. But we just have our own little preferences and stuff, and I think that's kind of what makes Nyota a good tool for non-professional developers. Or I mean, what was the term? I think a term that one of our coworkers used was like a citizen developer. There's a lot more ways to do things than you think there are, and it becomes less and less hard to mess things up. It's never like, as the better that you get at it, you don't go from messing stuff up to getting it right. You go from getting it better. Like, first, your logic is a lot, because you're learning and you're not really thinking through it. And then the more and more you do it, the cleaner and the smarter it gets. Not because you're getting smarter.
I still mess up, but you know, but you learn from your mistakes, and I think that's what you try to do, is you learn from your mistakes and you try to learn from each other. And so I mean, we have a great benefit that we work closely with each other and we learn from each other. And I think that's,
and if there's one thing I don't know how to do, then usually you know how to do it.
we don't, we just reach out to Nyota. They're able to.
So, yeah, so I think that's
And I was just going to add, you know, from my experience, empowering people on the business side to do what they need to do works so much better than trying to translate it over to developers and have them sort of do it in a vacuum. You know, so you guys are on the front lines, you know, you're interacting with the people that need the help. And you know, you have an understanding of what they need, you have an understanding of the platform. It's much easier to translate that and bring something in front of them that they'll actually use, rather than trying to take it away and have it developed in a vacuum, then have it brought back, you know, and find out, hey, this isn't what we needed at all.
Yeah, I will say people are pleasantly surprised when we present prototypes for the first time and we get a lot of the stuff right. Because I think that we balance each other out too, because, you know, my background is, you know, writing is very writing heavy and marketing heavy. And so it's like, I kind of use that for sort of the UX experience. And then Steven has this like super detail oriented side to himself where that you don't get with a traditional, maybe you don't get with a traditional developer. So like, we're able to say, like, because we are these, well, citizen developers. I'm going to stop saying fake developers, but like we have these other skill sets that maybe a traditional developer wouldn't have, and we kind of bring that, and people are usually pleasantly surprised, and they're like, oh, I like the way that sounds, or that's a good idea. And like, you know, a lot of the visual things in the graphics Stephen will make, that's just a skill set that he has of making. If I can't figure out how to make a screen look good, I just say, Stephen, just do this. I don't know. Like, I know it doesn't look good, but I don't know how. And I do think that's really good, because it's like, you're not going to get that if you're just giving it to a developer.
Yeah. And if you get feedback, you can go and make a revision relatively easily and bring it right back to them and say, hey, here I listened to what you said, and here's a new version. So you can have that back and forth. Yeah.
It's so much easier than going to tell I mean, because we do also have to do work on other projects outside Nyota Logic, and, you know, with engineers, whether they be contractors or internal. And it is a lot easier to make revisions yourself than to have that extra time to go in and ask somebody to do it and then check to see if they did it. And so you're up, I think. Yeah.
Well, I'm up. All right, that's me. So this is really kind of my pitch for what we do. And when I talk to our clients, it's not about taking away your job. It's not about doing, you know, this automation is going to, you know, take everything away and you're not going to have a job. And every time I talk to them, I always tell them, like, we are going to give you something that's like 80 to 90% completed with what you need. And you're going to be able to use that extra time to do other things, whether it's work related or go get a cup of coffee, you know, and go and just kind of relax for 30 minutes. And then that's something that we really stress with them, is that it's not going to solve everything, but what it's going to do is going to give you some time back. And it's really about giving little bits of time. We learned that from, you know, when we were working, when we started using, we wanted these grand ideas that was going to solve the whole issue or the whole problem or everything. But when we started realizing what Nyota can do and trying to get it to, you know, more traction in the firm, it was small parts. what can we do to improve this one section of your automation or what you do on a day-to-day basis? And this really started out with our audit letters. Fortunately for me, the person in the firm who does all the audit letters sat next to me in the office, was the office right next to me. And she would sit there and she would say, oh man, I got to go into the document management system. I got to find the correct paragraph that I need to insert into this document. And I asked her, how do you know that? And she says, I just know it. And I said, well, how do you know which document? I just remember. And so then I started asking the questions. Is it always the same? Yeah, I have 4 or 5 different paragraphs that I plug right here. And so then we started talking about, well, how can we automate this for you, where you just have a checkbox that you can click and then that paragraph gets plopped in. And so she and the audit system was probably one of the first big systems that we created. And she continues to use it today. And in fact, last week I had, a conversation with her to make some updates to the system, but the system they've been using it for a couple of years now, and it does a great job. We've added additional things to it. But we're looking at other things that, attorneys get wind of all of this. And one is our trademark demand letter. And one of the attorneys came to me and said, hey, can you automate this? I heard you can automate stuff. And I said, yeah, we can do that. And send the letter. And so we started doing that. And I was going through it with the attorney, and he said, well, I use this, but I would like it for my whole group to use this because this is a pretty standard letter. And I said, well, we can easily do that. We could pick a drop-down menu of the list of all the different attorneys in the group. You pick, if you're the person, you put it in there, and then it puts their entire signature box in there, their letterhead, all the specific things. So it looks like it's coming from whichever attorney on that group. And so we've done that, and that has just saved them time. I don't know how much time, but I do know when I talked to the attorney, I said, what's that going to save you? He's like, I don't know, 30 minutes. I said, well, that's 30 minutes that you can bill to somebody else. And that's where we're trying to find the benefit of using a platform like Nyota and automating stuff. And then finally, probably a couple of other things that we've done is, not even just for attorneys, but we've done a lot of applications for staff. So we have 19 offices in the United States. And during the time that some of our directors of administration came and asked, they said, hey, can you automate our staff offer letter? And I said, sure. I said, can you send me what you have? And they sent me what they have. And they said, this is what we use. And I said, well, what are all the colors? There's red, there's green, there's blue. I said, oh, well, those all mean like, if you have this, you put this in here. If you have this type of person, you put this color in there, and then you plug this in. And I said, well, who uses this? I said, I think every office. And I said, okay. And I said, well, you need a standard template. And so we ended up creating a staff offer letter application that allows them to create a standardized staff offer letter across our 19 offices. And all they need to do is pick which office, and it, pumps out the information on the letterhead, and they check boxes and they put in some information. And again, after we implemented this, I talked to them, and I just remember one of the DOAs, as that's what we call them, directors of administration, the DOA, said to me, he said, I did this during my lunch. And I said, yeah. And how long did it take? I don't know, 10 minutes? I said, how long would it have normally taken you? A couple hours just to go through the whole document, just to make sure. And now all I'm doing is checking boxes. And I said, and that's what we're aiming for. We're not aiming to solve the problem itself, but just give them time back. And so we've done a lot of different other applications related to trust and estates. We've done some client intake forms so that the client is putting in the information. We're not getting this information in a Word document and then somebody on our side plugging it into some sort of database or some sort of, yeah. And so if the client is going to know the information better than us. And probably one of the biggest things that we've done that probably is the most time saver in using Nyota is what Nyota calls reusable logic. And that is bulk generation of documents. What we use is what is, I think it's the Nyota data storage, which is the older version of the data manager. But you can use that to import data from an Excel spreadsheet. And so everything is on an Excel spreadsheet for some reason. But
because Excel's awesome.
I just need tables, that's it. But so recently we've had, I worked with an internal group, our talent management group. And, this is something that all law firms do, and that is CLE forms. They have, attorneys attend CLEs, they need some sort of certificate to file with their bar. And they came to me and they said, can you automate this? And, I said to them, I said, well, how do you do this now? I said, well, I type each one in. I said, well, what if it's like 100? I said, I type 100 of them in. And I said, well, where's all this data live? Well, I read it off of this Excel spreadsheet. And then I type it into the certificate. And I said, okay. And so, we worked with them to get this done. And so now what they do is they have that Excel spreadsheet, they import it into the NDS, and then they hit run on the application. The application does its thing using reusable logic because all of the fields are the same, and reads each row of that data storage or that Excel spreadsheet, and it generates 100 documents or 150 of those documents. And every document is identical or the same. And then even Nyota is smart enough where you can even name the document that comes out uniquely. So every document could have like a North Carolina CLE dash Stephen J, or the next one could be dash Melanie Segraves.
But even you could do that part. I know, isn't there some people that one of their challenges is like just not being able to name the files correctly. You can even do that with Nyota. Like sometimes that's just a real thing. People struggle with standardizing documents and and things like that. And it's just so easy. It's so simple to do. And once you do it one time in any type of yes, in that case, yes. Okay, but we should have read that. Yeah, we should have. We're noobs. Okay, so NDS that Steven's talking about, yes, in that case, we're importing an Excel sheet, which has the benefit if the Excel sheet already exists, right? We also use NDM in some of our other applications, which is Nyota's data manager, where you could be saving data that is input in a Nyota application, and then another application uses that data that you input. And you can avoid the Excel sheet altogether. You can do that also.
We found is, I think NDS is the older version, but still, a lot of utility to that. There is a manual aspect to it. You need to upload that Excel spreadsheet into the NDS, and then you have to map the columns in the Excel spreadsheet with the variables inside the application. There is a manual aspect to it, but it's really, we found an easy way of, you name the columns the same as the variable name. And so when you have someone who's not familiar with the system, it's an easy one-to-one. You match them up, and then they move forward.
And the thing with that too is you have some people internally that upload their own things to NDS. And you can say to an admin or a person that if you already have the document, here's the template. Every time if someone's filling it out, here's a template that we provide to you with the same column headers. You fill it out and you upload it, and that kind of takes us out of the equation too. And I think that's kind of the goal, right, with automating some of those.
Is giving them the power to be able to do this at the time that they need it. And then, there's a bit of training that has to happen, but it never really takes that, long. And you may have to train them a couple times because they don't do it every day. And so that's kind of what we do.
Did that answer the question? The question, just to rehash, was the automation we were talking about using an Excel sheet as the data source, but via Nyota. So I hope we answered that. Yes, it is. However, in other cases, we do not use an Excel sheet and we use another application inside Nyota. That's fun. Answering questions on the computer is fun. What?
You know, it's just useful to mention there that a lot of the everyday automation things that we're talking about here are just about how Nyota can be used in a modular way. That you can build part, you know, someone comes to you and says, could you automate this? You automate that, and then you find the next stage or the previous stage, and you can slowly develop an end-to-end solution just by finding the pain points.
For sure.
And just by making your daily life slightly easier each time. So.
And when we talk about the workflows that we've done, those are end-to-end solutions.
Yeah.
100% Nyota. Outside of the fact that it goes to your inbox, but you know, and then that's another point. But so that's definitely where you want to get to. It's just so much easier if you do it in stages. So. Oh, this is Jonathan.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of this you've touched on, but I'll just highlight a little bit, you know, the versatility of the platform. So you can go to, you know, your various practice areas and really, you know, provide them solutions that work for their specific area. So you're not tied into you know, one way of dealing with the problem. You can really have it adaptable to a variety of different situations. And I think one of the key things that you've mentioned is the integration with your existing systems. So you mentioned HiQ, and you mentioned, you know, other data sources. So that those tools can be integrated into your automation pieces. So you're building bridges between investments that you've already made. You already invested in HiQ, you invested in a CRM, you've invested in document management or CLM. All these other solutions, if you can tie them together and pass information to those, then those, not only are you getting more out of those investments, you know, you're streamlining the automation and tying everything together. So I just wanted to highlight those two things. You guys have already provided plenty of examples, and I'm sure you have other ones where you've been able to go and help, you know, one group after another with a particular you know, particular problem they're having. A couple things you mentioned earlier that I just wanted to highlight. You know, the document automation, that seems to be a recurring, you know, pain point that you address. And I think that's a great starting point. If you automate that and then you tie it together, you know, with other workflow and other solutions, then, oh, someone has to leave.
Okay.
then you get more value there too. So yeah, and just once again, from my experience, your approach is the approach that's always worked more effectively. When you start small and show, you know, you show value to individual groups, then you build buy-in, you build in credibility, and then it's easier to build, you know, bigger solutions, end-to-end solutions that way.
And I will add to that too, is like what we realized, especially as we started integrating with some of our internal databases, that when you talk about moving small, I also want to say that we have to build up that trust too, because a lot of this data is very important. The document, I mean, you know, I guess that should go without saying, but never not worth emphasizing that, especially as I was working through the workflows, we're dealing with sensitive client data that has to be secure. We have to pay attention to a lot of ways that data is managed in Nyota, and it's moving across different applications. And we worked really closely with our InfoSec team, and you know, at Womble we have pretty strict security, and because a lot of our clients have very strict security, and we were able to accomplish all of that. I mean, some workarounds, but like really, it's been kind of amazing what we've been able to do with the data once we connected it to our internal databases. That's kind of like, that's been a game changer for us. So
just to continue on quickly, because I know we're running out of time. I can't believe it.
yeah, because we can talk a lot to make
quickly, just to talk about the flexibility. And then again, we'll bring it back to the beginning when I said that we were looking at Nyota as a document automation tool. And when COVID hit, I can tell you that if we had a document automation tool, a pure document automation tool, we wouldn't have been able to do the things that we were able to do in response to COVID with Nyota. And what we were asked was to basically create an application that everybody in the firm in the US would use to fill out, to self-report their health before coming into the office. If we had a document automation tool, a pure document automation tool, we would not have been able to do what we did. And so we were able to quickly create a health application, basically a health survey that all the employees use. It looked great on a phone. And they could get on a phone and just fill it out before they came into the office. They could do it on a desktop and fill it out. And that gave all of our directors of administration notification of who was coming into the office and whether or not they were allowed to come into the office. If they, said yes to any of those questions or something like that, they would have been told, you can't come into the office because you have a fever or something to that effect. And then on top of that, we ended up developing another application. Melanie developed this application called a weekly forecast, which would allow our attorneys and staff to forecast what they're going to do the upcoming week. When
we had occupancy restrictions in place. That was the second phase.
Yeah.
Really going full circle with COVID.
Yeah, just we're at 25%. We're at 50%. And Nyota is powerful enough that it was able to calculate by floor how many people we could have on a floor to meet that threshold percentage of occupancy.
Now, I did have to speak to a facility manager for every floor in every office to calculate that. However, once you did it, put it in, it's really pretty great.
Yeah.
So, like, going full circle, let's talk about, we had the health survey, which was important to people screening. Okay. And then we had the forecasting tool. And now the next application that we're working on, it will be to help automate the process of people requesting to work from home and having that approved by our Agile work committee. So it's kind of taken us full circle in a way that we wouldn't have expected, or we would have never, we would have never expected to be.
Yeah.
Well, we would have never expected COVID, right?
Yeah.
Had we thought of that ahead of time. But I mean, but then we wouldn't have expected that our team would be so integral and important to how the firm is managing that. And that has been a big thing that's brought a lot of exposure to our team, which has been great. So we have a lot of people coming to us and asking us for, assistance with things that we would have never expected.
So, and just kind of looking at the questions, I think Suzanne asked the question, how do you cover the cost of the app, especially for internal groups? And I believe that it's a subscription. Nyota is a subscription. It's not based off of applications of, like how many applications you have in the system. So that's where we said, if we're paying this fee, per month or per year or whatever it may be, it's best to just try to get as many applications that are being used across the firm as we can, because you're getting more on your investment on Nyota. So there's not that I know of, is that there's not a cap on how many applications you can.
And also to say that at Womble, our KM team supports the entire firm. So there's no group specific, we don't group specific budget. I mean, there are, individual practice groups, internal groups have their own budgets, but we manage Nyota in the KM budget, which, and on the backside of that, we need to be able to show how we're bringing value to the entire firm, and in order to keep products that we use in KM. So we do have to show that. And there was another question above that from Alan, who says, hi, Alan. Have you managed to benefit from / integrate the intelligent automation to manage accurate contact data in IntroHive into Nyota solutions? And I will be totally honest that I don't know what IntroHive is. If anyone wants to, or Alan, if you want to type anything in there about what intro hive is. If you're still on, if we bored you to death, that's fine. Wait, hold on. I think we might have. Is it on there?
That's right. You're
Oh,
controlling my
CRM
mouse as
system.
well.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, the way that we connect the other systems, so I use REST API calls or web services, which would be the tool in Nyota to pull data. And in some applications, I'm posting it back, but in a lot of applications, I'm just receiving data, which would be like contact information from a CRM system, and using it. And there is a way to post it back, but like for some of our other applications, we use our actual live employee data. That's not managed or maintained in Nyota, but is internally maintained and with HR, and it pulls that contact information, so we know it's always accurate. And in theory, that would be the same way that you would do it for CRM. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, we had to involve, our IT department and making sure, and our InfoSec team to make sure that all of that data flowing, from our internal systems into Nyota, into the cloud, and potentially back is secure. So I think in one of the applications that was business critical for us, a business generation request application that Melanie created with workflows, we created a system basically, or a connection with Azure, and as an in-between to make sure that data is available, can be easily accessible by Nyota, but also secure. So I'll move on.
And the other thing that we use, so I have used, and I just recently started using CPI patent data with using REST API. So we've been able to integrate data through various systems with web services. So I guess the answer is web services.
Basically anything which has a REST API, which is, to be honest, most CRMs can integrate with Nyota very easily. So.
Correctly.
And I'll just, we move on to and I know we're way over time, but really we can kind of continue if we can, but it's really this relationship that we've had with Nyota. We've been with Nyota for about 3 or 4 years now. We've had a great relationship with Nyota. Like I mentioned, the training is great. So when you're starting out, you've got good training. But then when you start developing, you're always going to go back to the user manual that is available online. And it gives great examples. It gives you, detailed ways of how to do certain things. And then most recently, maybe within the last year, Nyota created a library within the platform where it is sample applications that probably the Nyota solution architects have created to kind of give you an idea of how you can do certain things. And that's been tremendously helpful. But overall, I would have to say that, and I'm going to give a shout out because Melanie's going to agree with me, but, the solution architect that we work with, his name is Moses Harding. He's just been incredible. He's just a nice person and very knowledgeable, along with Alex Bober, who's I believe our account manager. I mean, those guys have just been great. And prior to that, it was Max Patterson was just great. And all of those guys have been just really great to work with. We pose the questions and then they pose a question to us like, is this what you're trying to do?
And I think, I don't want to toot our horns too much here, but I think they learn from us too.
Yeah, so, or it's just like, you want to do what?
I think it's a two-way street. I'll say this. They're not on the line, so I'll say that.
It is, but I mean, they learn from us too, because then it also gives Nyota an opportunity to say, hey, we have a client here that we've been working with for several years. They're asking a question, can Nyota do this? And I don't know if you all bring that back to your development team or what, but usually come the next release or on the line, something is coming out that addresses that kind of issue. And I think that,
gives us the chance to do things like this even.
And that workflow, the workflow module, we'll say, has really been a game changer for us, because it allowed us to do a lot of different things that the basic applications in Nyota, not that it couldn't do, but it just made it that much easier. So
yeah, and to say that on the workflows, you know, like as I mentioned, having that marketing background, I was used to using a lot of email marketing, a lot of different types of email marketing platforms and CRM. And so, you know, Moses had said, oh, can you take some screenshots and just say some things that you would improve? To which I said, I would never do this without you asking me. I wouldn't, I would never just take screenshots and tell you what I don't like about something. But like, it's good because that input has already been incorporated into like newer releases of the workflows. And I think we were really heard. And yeah, and I think that's been very important. Okay,
yeah. To the next bit. Sorry?
Yeah, do we still want to I didn't know if we still want to, I mean, we still have some people on the line, some people didn't leave.
Let's just glide through workflows.
Okay,
I've just released the poll. So how much do you know about workflow or workflow automation? And those answers filtering through. But yeah, I think at this point, it's just quite nice to say, yeah, you're definitely not tooting your own horn. That's the benefit of a platform solution as opposed to something which comes pre-packaged. It's the case that we're learning from you, Nyota learns from you and what our clients need. And as you said, it kind of comes up in the next release. That's really the benefit of having a tech vendor like that, where it's a development platform, and you are the developers at the end. So you're asking for different tools, basically, rather than a different solution.
Yeah, true. That's a good way to put it.
So our answers are in. So 7% have never heard of workflow or workflow automation. 53% heard of it but don't fully understand. And 40% have said workflows are my lifeblood.
Whoa.
Yeah. Where do you go with that?
Well, maybe you can speak. No. That's awesome. Jonathan, do you want to touch on a little bit on this screen?
Well, yeah, you guys have stolen all my thunder, I think, with all your conversation. But yeah, just to reiterate, you know, the workflow module is really kind of the evolution of what you've started. So you build all these pieces, you build automation, you build individual apps, and then the workflow allows you to bring all those together in a true end-to-end solution. So, you know, and I know when you said you initially got Nyota, you thought, hey, we had these grand plans to build, you know, these really expansive solutions, and you realized that wasn't the best approach to build something, you know, broad to start with. It's better to start with smaller solutions that address very specific problems or issues. But then once you have the buy-in, once you've established the use cases, then using workflow, you can come in and actually realize the vision you had originally, which was to build, you know, a broader solution. But it's really not the starting point. It's more the end of the road where you bring everything together and sort of realize, you know, the vision that you started with several years ago. And I think once again, from my experience, that's always been the case. You know, you start out with a more narrowed focus, and then once you bring all those tools together, you know, you create these end-to-end solutions with workflow.
I would agree with all that. I mean, I'll go ahead and tell you 2 examples, I guess, if we hit on them. I don't have the match. Oh, okay, that's it. Do you want to?
Can you move to the next slide?
Yeah, ours isn't working for some
There you go.
Definitely trust with technology. But anyway, so these 2 requests, and I won't go into too much details, but so there were 2 requests. These are the first, these are the 2 workflows that I developed and we're managing now. And it was really awesome about these is that, and probably why we had success, is that these are 2 processes that did not exist before we designed them in Nyota with the workflows. I mean, we had So for the business generation request, it was a requirement document. And so it's similar for the work from home request, but I mean, being able to come up with the workflow in Nyota, and if you go to the next screen, that's okay. This kind of shows you the editor tool. And so it gives you like the visual of exactly what's going to happen. And this is something that can be shared and understood in a group setting versus like showing somebody, I guess you don't have to make a separate process map for it. It's all there and it's living and breathing. And I like that aspect of the workflows. And the more that you begin to work in them, the more comfortable you can start feeling, understanding the concepts. Also knowing things like where do you put the email node, and what makes someone a lane, and can you have multiple people in lanes, and like things like that. As the more that you begin to use them, then the more you understand those like fundamental concepts. Those are things that you can take with you into just, well, not your brain, but you know what I mean, this is knowledge that you gain, right, that you can use for designing future processes outside of even using Nyota logic. So that's, to me, that's a big benefit. And the other part about that is you're able to use to automate the emails with reminders, and I think that's very beneficial because one thing that I found to be useful is to design and approve the emails ahead of time, so sort of templatize them. And that's something that you can be doing while you're developing the other solutions. And then that's something that you can have these great custom emails that you don't have to worry about later. And that's not something you would get if you just worked with an engineer. Like he's not gonna give you email template, or he or she, let me say that. But I mean, like, you're not likely to get them to say, oh, here's some email templates and let's think about the design and how we're going to do that. And I think that's really been a big benefit. And I will say, without, I know how many people said workflow, they love workflows. That's great. And if you're the same people that also use Nyota, that's great too. One thing that I think is a game changer for me and what we're going to be using moving forward is the service task. And if you're familiar with Nyota, then you'll know that, or if you're familiar with the workflow module in Nyota, you'll know that those rectangles, they are a task, and a task is an action basically, and in most cases it's an application. However, right now the data moves through these, and an actual person, or a role, if you say, uses the application, and that completes the task. Moving forward though, service tasks can be ran on their own. So it's like gives you an opportunity to have something automated in the background without any user input whatsoever. That to me is a really big game changer. I think it's going to change the way that workflows are used in Nyota, and it's going to change the way several of the processes that we've already designed can be done without any input from the user at all. And I think that's really the future of automation, the future of everyday automation. That might be a good place to end. I would say if anybody else has any questions, we are still free for a few more minutes. Nope.
Went over.
Yeah, we went very over, which is what we tend to do, what we did last time. Oh, yep, no, they're going.
Yeah.
People they're abandoning ship.
I think, I
think that makes sense.
I think we'd be happy if someone wants to contact either one of us directly with questions.
Yeah. I'll send out contact details and everything like that as well. So yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And if anyone's thinking about using Nyota logic and it's something that you're considering, we'd be happy to answer questions about that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for attending, and have a lovely rest of your day, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it may be.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you so
Thanks,
much,
everyone.
guys. Have a good rest of your day.
All right.
Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.
Okay, bye-bye.